to the October edition of the Dmfa Luncheon. We have a good program here for you today, and it's really nice that you all came out, and it's really wonderful. We have a small group here, but it's a nice group. I can tell from talking to people. They just seem extra special. Okay, a couple of things to run down as far as what's going on at the Dmfa. And I'll start with today's topic. We have Davida Isaacson of Davida Isaacson Consulting and Stacy B. Sulman, Vice President, Family, Philanthropy, and Legal Affairs, American Committee for the Weizmann Institute of Science. Is that all correct?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, good. And they are both going to be talking about maximizing the relationship between direct response and planned giving.
I want to thank you, and I don't just mean thank you for having me here to speak today or be on this panel with my friend Stacy, but really thank you, each of you, whether you are with a organization who does, and your role is the direct mail area, or whether you are with a firm who does direct mail, because it is each and every one of you that brings to plan giving officers like me and like Stacy our best prospects. And we're going to talk a little bit about how that happens, and we want to applaud you and take your role very seriously. Believe it, we take your role very, very seriously. But I want to start off actually with a definition of plan giving. And you heard that I was with WNET, and if Giselle Holloway was here, she would confirm that because we were there at the same time for a while. And my definition of planned giving, which actually I still teach to my students in the master's program at NYU, is very simplistic. But the way it came about was through pledge drives. Have any of you ever seen a public television pledge drive by any chance? You have, thank you. One person in the room has seen a pledge drive. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Well, a little known secret is that those pledge breaks, you know, you've got the wonderful show going on, and then you have the break where the volunteers are answering phones and the announcer is talking to the guests, etc. Those are produced by producers on staff at WNET. And they think that they're producing the next Emmy Award-winning show, okay? That's the truth. And so when I was there, when they heard that this person wants to go on what they termed their air and talk about what they thought was death and dying, you could imagine that it did not go over very well. So if I got a minute and a half or 2 minutes in a whole week's worth of pledge, that was a lot of time. So what would typically happen was Tom Stewart, who is still the voice of 13, would turn to me and say, "So Davida, what is planned giving?" Hence the definition. Planned giving is a way to make a gift. It really is that simple. And as we go through this, you'll see that we can come back to that definition time and time again. Now, usually it involves some forethought and consideration. It may involve some professional advisors along the way, but basically it's a way to make a gift. And what my friends at WNET who did direct mail all the time told me was, but you don't understand. We don't want to give our donors choices in our direct mail. We want to make an ask and we want them to respond. We don't want to muddy the waters with your ideas of bequests and life insurance and retirement funds, etc. And I said, well, I understand what you're saying, but what you don't realize is that it's your direct mail donors that are the pipeline to those major, what we call actually ultimate gifts, which are planned gifts. Bequests and wills are the #1 planned gift. And it's because people see a message over and over again that they're going to ultimately respond in that fashion. So what planned giving does is speak to someone not quite the way you do in your quote-unquote typical direct mail asks. We don't want someone's income. We don't want money from the checking account you know, that thing that zeroes out at the end of the month. We want to talk to them about their assets. And people have assets that they can use for charitable giving purposes that they don't realize. They don't realize, A, that they have the assets, and they don't realize that they can use them for charitable giving purposes unless they're educated along the way. And we'll talk later about how that education goes forth, and direct mail is obviously a big way to do it. So I believe, this is my personal opinion, hopefully shared by many, that the role of any development professional in any organization should be to maximize the donors giving to the organization. Would anybody disagree with that? A development professional's role should be to maximize an individual's giving to the organization. Well, I think you could see that you're not going to maximize it if it's just about that annual gift, if it's just about the gift that you're asking for in much of the direct mail marketing that goes on. So what you want to do is show donors optional ways to make a gift. Now, this is where my friends always told me the waters got muddied, because we don't want to show people options. And I realized, actually not too long ago, that it's not just about options. It's really about additional ways to make a gift. Optional and additional ways to make a gift. Your donor base that you have spent so much time building and cultivating and prospecting for is the exact donor base, when educated, that can use their assets to make additional gifts to your organization, and therefore you are the heroes because you're maximizing that individual's giving to your organization for the programs and services to provide the mission-saving work that you do. So it's optional and additional ways to make a gift. Who then makes planned gifts, and why is it important that you study the database that you are presented with and that you have ongoing for your direct mail marketing efforts? Well, I want to actually dispel a couple of rumors. One rumor is, I'm sure you've all heard this, that only old people make planned gifts. The reason I'm going to dispel that is, first of all, because as I get older, I don't like that term. It's all relative. I knew that I was in planned giving too long when I woke up a number of years ago now on a significant birthday, and the first thing that crossed my mind was, oh my God, I'm charitable gift annuity age. And you know, when that's the first thing you think of on your birthday, that shows you need a life. You need a life. So planned giving is not just for the elderly. And as you can segment your market, which you do so well for so many things, for your giving levels, etc., as you segment your market for those things, you can also segment for planned giving. For example, an organization with a young demographic, there are opportunities for planned giving. In fact, life insurance is a terrific planned gift for a younger demographic because it costs a whole lot less for a 40-year-old to take out a policy and leave it to the organization than it does for an 80-year-old. So they're getting a lot more bang for their buck. But will we realize these gifts until someone is later in life? That is usually true. Usually. Obviously, if people live their expected life expectancy, we will see the gifts. We will see the rewards of the planned giving process that's been taking place when these gifts, as we call them, mature, which is often when someone dies. Many planned gifts are deferred gifts. Deferred meaning that the organization will not see the revenue until sometime in the future. A bequest in a will, a beneficiary designation, life insurance, etc. But not all planned gifts are deferred. There are what we call charitable lead trusts, which pay income to the charity now. The instrument is set up while someone's alive, or it could be through a will, but often while they're alive, to make income stream payments to a charity and run for years and years and years. So there are other ways to do planned gifts that are not necessarily deferring the revenue to the organization. One of the major segments that we find is the typical plan giving prospect is those that have given to your organization for a number of years. The number goes from 7, you'll hear some people say 7 years, 8 years, 6 years, 5 years, 10 years. And the basic truth of that is that those donors are not necessarily, and often not, your major donors. They are your lower level, consistent donors. If you've ever heard a talk on plan giving, hopefully you have heard that message. And I'm sure, I would hope that every one of you in this room can cite an instance where that has occurred in your organization. Those are the aha moments. And often in an organization, a check will come in or a notice of probate will come, and you'll look back at that donor's record and you'll say, oh my God, this is what she was talking about.
If I can add, in our case, in more than one instance, those are the donors who take the rolls home from the dinner party. You'd be surprised with the locks in the bag, and then you get a couple $1 million in their estate. So it's the surprise. Those are the surprises you get time and time again.
Right. And by the way, when we get those surprises, just so you understand, if you're in plan giving, you've got to keep a sense of humor about yourself or about things, because otherwise you'd cry a lot. I used to wear black all the time because you never knew when I had to go to a memorial service or a funeral. I've graduated to other colors now since I'm a consultant. But seriously, it is those surprises that we celebrate the gift. We never celebrate the death, but we celebrate the gift. So the demographics that you have so rich in your databases are going to lead us to those planned gift donors who will help you to maximize the giving potential of that donor to the organization. We're going to move someone from that annual gift to a special gift to an ultimate gift. This is Dave Dunlop from Cornell University put it that way. Special, move them along the continuum, annual, move them along the continuum to special, and then to ultimate, which is often the planned gift, often the largest gift the individual has made to an institution, and often, though not always, at death. When I say not always, just an example. Last December, I received a call at a donor that I was working with closely for an individual, for a couple to do a $300,000 charitable gift annuity. I looked them up on the donor's records. Over the past 5 years, they had given a total of $100. And now we're making a charitable gift of $300,000. We're in their will for over $1 million, and this is how you maximize their giving potential. It's not about the income, it's about the assets. And most planned gifts come from assets. Beneficiary designations of retirement funds. We've all heard the jokes about the 401k is now a 201k. I don't want to hear that anymore. First of all, things have recovered. And secondly, there is still a lot of money in those retirement plans. People need to be educated, and we can talk to them through direct mail to educate them about utilizing that asset. And actually, from a tax point of view, it's a very smart way to make a gift, utilizing that asset to make charitable gifts. Charitable gifts in an estate plan really say something very strong about the values of that individual. And many individuals, and Stacy could speak to this very well, more and more individuals are wanting to translate and transfer their value system to the next generation. And one of the ways they do that is with charitable giving through their estate plans. Had a friend who is extraordinarily wealthy, And he told me this story that he and his wife were sitting talking about their estate plans when one of their sons came in. And he said, so David said, what are you talking about? And Michael said, oh, Mom and I are discussing our estate plans. And he said, Michael went on to say, and by the way, just so you know, for this, it's as if we have 4 children. And David said, hey, wait a minute. There's my brother, my sister, and me. That makes 3. What are you talking about? And Michael said, Charity is the 4th. And then Michael went on to tell me that David stormed out of the room, only to come back a little bit later and say, that's neat. So it's a passing of values, and people really care about it. Why should organizations be in the plan giving business? First of all, it maximizes revenue. Your competition is doing it. Everyone is doing it. I'm now a consultant, as you heard. Fortunately, more and more organizations are coming to the awareness that if they had done planned giving and used planned giving revenue to build endowment, because it's not as well suited for meeting operational needs because of the uncertainty of when revenue will come in, if organizations had built that endowment, it would have made it much easier to weather these economic times when annual gifts are down. So the competition is doing it. There's tax advantages for donors. People we know are not motivated strictly by tax benefits, but when they can take advantage of them, they do and should. And we know, as we were talking about earlier, that the only certainty right now is the uncertainty of what might happen to those tax advantages, and we have to keep a close eye on that and how it will relate to charitable giving in general and planned gifts obviously as well. So using assets, talking to your donors about all of that is what's going to help you move a donor along the continuum and maximize their giving potential. And that is going to set your organization in great stead for the future. And now we'll talk more about motivations from Stacy.
Yeah, I hope you can see me back here. I don't like these podiums, but I was asked to stay here. Well, so again, thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure getting to speak in front of all of you guys, and it's always a pleasure getting to speak with Davida, who was my first boss in this career and really got me into the career. I won't say how many years ago. It's been a while. It's been a long time. But it's really wonderful, and it's great to be up here with her. And I want to tell you about something that happened to us this morning. I have 2 colleagues here, April and Sandra, who work very closely in everything we do in our plan giving arena. And this morning we opened up a big envelope, and in it was information about a life insurance policy we were the beneficiary of that the person just died very recently. And actually, she was the secondary beneficiary, but the first person had died already. I think that's what happened. This woman died in Boca, and we're the beneficiaries, and we had to fill out some forms. $800,000, that was nice. We called up the lawyer, and it turns out, we're also the remainder, 20% of her estate. Very nice. And interestingly, in this year, she has to pay estate taxes, so we won't see that money for a long time. But it's really interesting, too, because this year, if you're married, that's $10 million before you pay estate taxes. So this is a person of pretty good capacity, and she died in the right year from a tax perspective. Very, very sophisticated planning as well. And we looked on our database, and who was this woman? We had never heard of her. The person in South Florida who represents us, never heard of her, no notes. One thing we know she did receive was direct mail. Over the years, she's gotten various direct mail, probably mostly from our department, which is now, we call it the Center for Personalized Philanthropy. We don't call it plan giving, and I'll get into that in a minute. But we know she received this. We got maybe $50 here and there? I don't even remember. Nothing. Oh, nothing. This is like a real classic story. Nothing. But at some point, she got a piece of mail, we think, and told her lawyer, put us in her will, and she wrote us in her insurance policy. So this is big stuff. And this is happily not the first and only time this happens. This happens, you can't predict it, you can't expect it, and I'll get into the fact that challenge is an ongoing one for us. You can't count it ahead of time, you can't budget for it. You're not even sure you can put it in a chart because you don't know about it. But it does happen. And this is the argument, this is a nutshell, is the argument for plan giving direct mail. Separate and apart for the argument for direct mail generally. Plan giving direct mail has its own rewards. And I'll talk about that. But I just thought that was such a great anecdote and honestly didn't, I hadn't prepared that. It just happened. We used to be called the Plan Giving Department, and now we've expanded to Center for Personalized Philanthropy. And the reason, and I think it speaks to something that Davida was talking about, which is think of yourself in your financial capabilities. You don't think of yourself as, well, I'm a annual donor, and I am also going to give with my residuary. You don't think of yourself in all the different silos, ways you can give. You don't think of yourself in the departments of, I'm a direct mail person. You think of yourself as one person. And we try at Weitzman to deal with that person, you, with all your capacities. And that individual could have capacities in their income. They could, as they retire, want to get an annuity, a gift annuity, and they could be thinking about, as they develop their will, whether it's when they're in their 30s and have children or when they're 70s and finalizing their will, that their residual, they want to leave a legacy. And that's part of who they are in their head. They might also, and this is just to kind of characterize our department, they might have a donor advised fund at Jewish Communal Fund or at Fidelity or Schwab. They might have a private foundation that they're on the board of, if it's their parents, or that they founded, or that they just sit on because they're honored. All of these capacities are in their head. And as fundraisers, however we work with them, it's short-sighted of us not to realize that and realize that they're one person. They're not split up. And so our goal is simply to get them to love us and realize that if they love us and want to help us, we'll find a way to make a project or an initiative or have them support an effort or something that hits all the capacities that are ready to be hit, that are at the time they're ready. So we do things like virtual endowments where they'll pay an annual towards, say, a chair. I work for the Weitzman Institute of Science, which is in Israel. It's a basic science research institute, one of the top in the world. And we have, chairs like universities. So you could be paying the spending rate with your annual, but your residue, which is the leftover of your estate, would be endowing it. Or maybe your foundation will be endowing it, or your donor advised fund, or family members will be supporting it. So we don't try to limit, we try to expand. And when we do direct mail from our department and what's traditionally plan giving, we want donors to see all the ways that they could do it. So whether they're sitting on a board somewhere and they go, look, here's something interesting, or they're writing their will, or they're thinking about who to name in their insurance because their kids are in their 60s and are doing great and they already have a policy that's paid for, or they're looking again at their beneficiary designation and maybe their spouse has passed away and they want to leave it to somebody else. This is where we want to be. And we are, and it works. So that's sort of my oversight, my perspective. It's really that it starts with the donor. And the motivations are really where the donors are. And I think it's very often the charity is thinking about what they need. We need money for this. We need money for this. But that's not what the donor's thinking. They're thinking about what their capacity is, what money they want to get rid of, or they can comfortably let go of, and principally, in plan giving terms, what do they want to be what do they want their legacy to be? And that's very often what I talk about and what our message is. And the other element, and we're dealing with this more and more, is modeling family philanthropy, modeling a project and modeling something so that their children can see philanthropy in action and that their children can be part of it. And that's where sometimes we talk about giving now and giving later, and that's the message. And we have some of our marketing pieces that I'll pass out just to show you. We really are not mutually exclusive. We don't operate in silos, and our direct mail talks about that. And the other motivation for plan giving, and I'm speaking broadly, is really talking to people about how you can make the world a better place, where you can step in and make the world a better place, and how you can make your mark in the world. So these are sort of the underlying personal reasons people make plan gifts. Any gift, but certainly plan gifts. Gifts that, and I often define it as gifts that involve some kind of planning, whatever that may be. Whether it's planning with their family, planning with their advisors, planning in their head, planning their will, planning their trust, etc. So those are the motivations underlying all of our direct mail and underlying our plan giving. All right, so if you're going to have a plan giving campaign in your organization, what is the critical elements for your organization to have, and what are the expectations you want to have? And I think this is critical because unlike annual giving, direct mail, where there's an expectation, I think, that you're going to get money in the near term. As I gave in my example, plan giving, direct mail, unfortunately or fortunately, it's not necessarily going to be a short-run return. While we do get some, because our message is broad, and we just sent one out, the one I think that we're sharing, we got someone who called and we got a $50,000 gift. We get checks all the time with them. The big gift, which is what we're trying to get that $2 million gift with these. They're going to take time. They're going to take a couple years probably. People don't plan their death. They plan their wills. And so you just want to get in their will. And the challenge with an organization is to realize that they're budgeting for an expensive direct mail piece when there's not returns within that fiscal year. Certainly not, but not even in any predictable time. And that is, that works better with a large organization, like some of you I'm sure work for, and where there's a large group of donors who are at least a good chunk of them are in the 80 and above crowd, so that there's going to be some return. And actually, to the extent you have that chunk, some of them will respond in the near term, whatever that may be, where the organization has financial stability. You want an organization that knows it has a long future. It's not for the organization that's just worrying about operating money for the next minute. Not to say that you shouldn't do it, but you need to really know what you're getting into and that you're putting out this expense. But the organization that has stability, this furthers the stability and this guarantees the stability. As Davida mentioned, very often the types of gifts that you get as planned gifts, which are the residue of your will, of your estate, these big life insurance policies, they serve the endowment. Endowment is the principle where you only spend the income. And whether it's by the donor's direction or by your policy of your organization, that is the foundation for your charity. And charities that had a large endowment weathered the economic storm much better than ones that had small endowments. So really, plan giving is building that. It's building that structure for your organization. So really, to do this type of campaign well, you need your leadership's buy-in, whether it be your internal leadership or your board. But it's a line item in your budget that is not going to generate short-run returns, but the long-run returns will be very rewarding. And that's the message that needs to be understood. And there's so many examples, but it is very rewarding. I should have said this, and Davida, if there's any questions throughout, feel free to interrupt me. Okay. Okay. So what do I do as working for an organization when we're data mining for plan giving? And actually, Sandra and April both really help with that. We set categories of donors that we want to give to. While it is true, everyone can make a plan gift. We can put a charity in our will, in our life insurance, as a contingent beneficiary. As I said, because we want some return in the near future, we tend to focus on 70 and up, 75 and up. If you have to manage your budget. We have some Andrea here who helps us get mailing lists together, as many people as we can, either through outside sources or internally. And we really focus on that age group for the most part. Gift annuities, which Davida referred to, which is a basic plan giving technique where a donor makes a gift to charity and gets a guaranteed annuity. You've probably seen ads for them. It's a very large charities, all of them do that. The annuities are set by an outside council called the American Council of Gift Annuities. Those really work best at this point because of the interest rate being so low for people 75 and up. So we are very careful. We don't just blanket. We very rarely will just blanket everyone with it. It's a narrow target and with a focus towards the older people most of the time. I will step back and say, in some respect, and this goes back to what I started with, plan giving messaging is everywhere, and it should be everywhere. The idea of leaving a legacy doesn't have to be focused only on your plan giving direct mail, but everywhere. And many, many charities will have in all their mailings something like, have you remembered us in your will? Have you thought of a legacy with us? And you know, that's an easy tagline in everything. Again, your goal is to get the person who's sitting in their house in Boca to read it and go, oh, I'll tell my attorney. And I will say something about responses. In my opinion, the best responses, unfortunately or fortunately, from the direct mail, the best response is probably that they take your piece. Well, the best would be that they take it and call you for more information. That's the best. And we do get some of that. But the second best, and it may be just as good in the long run, is that they don't call you, you never hear from them, but they give it to their attorney and put you in their will. So you won't know that they did this, but that is probably that's probably the best response you could get. So, you know, that's our goal with all of our mailings, but certainly with the discrete plan giving mailings. Again, as Davida mentioned, a lot can be said for those people who've been giving $25 a year for 7 to 10 years, and especially very often those who've been giving for 7 years and then stop. Why do they stop giving?
Because they have power of attorney of the younger child.
Oh, that's one reason. Someone said something, yeah.
Sometimes they'll put you in their will, and then they say, well, I put them in my will, they're going to get all my money eventually, so I'm not going to give them any more money right now. And the big mistake is to stop mailing to those people, because they can fall out of love with you and in love with somebody else because they get someone else's mailing.
Exactly.
That's the challenge.
It's targeting, it's capacity You're looking for capacity, but you're not looking necessarily at giving history, because that would be misleading. In fact, it's often the flip, as we mentioned. And of course, we would include prospects, anyone who's called for anything. And we got another trust last week from someone who's leaving us a $700,000 charitable remainder trust, which is like an annuity. They put money in, they get an annuity for life, and then we get the remainder. And the person had responded to just a regular direct mail 5 years ago, 2008 maybe. We asked about trust. It must have been a plan giving one, because they checked a box. I want to know about trust. We sent a letter with a packet, never heard anything. This summer, a lawyer from Montclair, New Jersey, starts calling me and asking me about gift vehicles. She doesn't tell me what the donor is. I send her some information, and last week we got the copy of the trust. She just passed away. Again, it was from very little response, but just a little checkbox and something. Yeah.
Chuck Longfield had a statistic that people who call into an organization to give them a change of address, it was some enormous percentage of those people became plain gift donors.
That doesn't surprise me. I think they're reading your mail, and I think we'll talk a little about internet and certainly the plan giving population still are the ones are definitely reading the mail if they're interested, and any response is a good response. Anything, as you pointed out. All right, so to talk a little bit more about the content of direct mail, I call upon Davida.
So really we're talking about, when it comes to direct mail, we're talking about two different areas. One is the direct mail that you're doing, like my friends at Channel 13, that you're doing all the time for that annual gift. And as Stacy said, at the very least, on those pieces should be a checkoff box to indicate that somebody was interested in more information about giving through their estates. Now, what is really the crux of that whole thing is this. Those checkoff boxes on that BRE usually come back to someone not in the plan giving office, right? Especially if it has a check with it for an annual gift. So what you need to make sure in your organizations is that someone is actually looking to see whether those boxes are checked off. Now, I know that sounds, like, well, she's telling me something that I already know. Well, you'd be surprised at how much, you should remind people to look for those checkoff boxes, whoever's getting the mailings. My secret, so you all have to find your own secret, was cheesecake. I make a pretty good Oreo cheesecake. So every now and then, the mailroom or the membership department or the switchboard for phone calls that would come in would get a cheesecake, okay? You'd be amazed after that how many of those check boxes started appearing back in my office. Now, I don't know if they were checking them themselves or what was going on, but that's it. So there's those kinds of mailings that are the normal mailings, routine mailings, if you will, from your organization. Even the prospect mailings, I don't care what it is, there's got to be some message of plan giving, because the messaging has to be constant, continual, and consistent. And we don't know when people are going to write their wills. This tax environment is making us think that people are going more frequently, in a sense. They went maybe 2 years ago when the tax laws changed, and maybe they're going to go again next year when the tax laws change again, but we don't know that for sure. So we want to be in their consciousness, as Stacy said all the time. So where does those responses go? Who's looking at them? And make sure they get responded to, obviously, is key. So that's the one kind of direct mail effort. But the other is what Stacy was talking about that they do so much of, which is the discrete plan-giving mailings. And there is obviously a role for the direct mail community to play in discrete plan-giving mailings. And when I say discrete, talking specifically about a plan gift vehicle or other ways to make a gift, back to my definition. So how do you get your donors to read those materials? Well, you've got to give them lots of visuals. You always have to talk mission, mission, mission. Even though these can be intricate gift plans, the bequest is an exception to that, but people still perceive it as an intricate plan because they can't necessarily accomplish it themselves. They have to go somewhere and get it done. The thing that's going to make them go is because they believe in your mission. They believe in your mission, and as Stacy said, they want to leave a legacy. So discrete plan giving mailings should talk about perhaps charitable gift annuities. Stacy mentioned what that is, where an individual gets an income. It's called a life income gift. They get an income in return for it. In these economic times, people who have $10,000 in a money market account, how much are they getting on that? Nothing, nothing. If that individual whose age may be 70 gives it to a charity in exchange for a charitable gift annuity, they're going to earn, and I don't memorize the tables, but something like 6.9%. You've just increased somebody's income. And by the way, if you've increased their income, guess what they can do? They can make an annual gift to you that maybe was lapsed because because that checking account was zeroing out too early in the month. So now you've increased their income, you've given them tax benefits, and you've given them a legacy, because at the end of the term, which is their lifetime, it's going to go to the charity in whose mission they believe. So it's very important to talk to people at different times in their lives, which you know from your databases, from your direct mail polls. You know when to talk to them about this, that, or the other thing. And we know, we in Plan Giving keep great tabs on what's going on in the economy and what's going on with tax laws, because much of it is critically tied to that. But in any event, it's about educating your donors, whether it be with discrete plan giving mailings, as Stacy does so effectively at Weitzman, or whether it be taglines on existing mailings. When I say taglines, again, I just want to go back to that for a second. Your solicitations and your acknowledgments, they both should have that checkoff box. And it should be very easy for somebody to accomplish to send that back in order to accomplish the gift. Get people to read the mailings. follow-up calls. Follow-up is so very critical, and I think, Stace, you were going to talk about follow-up, right? Okay, well, either one. When they send that back, like I said, if they are not responded to, they're going to fall out of favor with you, just as was mentioned before. At Channel 13, and again, I think public television, and maybe it's just because I loved my days there, my years there, are masters at direct mail. I mean, they do it all the time. 85% of the bequests that came across my desk were from non-members of the station. Non-members. They didn't pay $40 a year to join. Okay? But they got those mailings over and over and over again. Of that other 15%, 90% were low-level donors. They got your mailings over and over and over again. And the message about planned giving was always there, always consistent, and always the same. And that sinks in. So when somebody is ready to go write their will, they know that Channel 13 is top in their mind. So you have to set your institution apart. You have to remember that everybody else is doing it. The good thing about planned giving is that what everybody else is doing helps you too, because it's helping to educate your constituency about planned giving. I wrote an article for the monthly program guide one year about life insurance gifts, how somebody could make a gift of life insurance. And there was, just like the producers produced the next Emmy Award-winning show, the editors of the Channel 13 program guide are editors, and they have strict guidelines. And they said, you can't ask for anything in this column. You can only inform. The Educational Broadcasting Corporation, by the way, is our name. You educate. So I educated about leaving life insurance to charity. 2 weeks after it hit the mail, a friend of mine at another charity called. She said, I want to thank you. I said, what for? She said, one of my donors called, saw your article in the program guide, and is doing it for us. So the fact that the colleges and universities do such a great job, why do they do it? Because they have ages. I mean, they know ages. The fact that they're doing such a good job helps each and every one of you. But if people are not seeing it in your materials, they're not going to realize that you too are worthy of that planned gift, of that legacy gift. Donor privacy. I just want to touch on that for a second. This topic, as you can imagine, is very, very personal. I think you're supposed to do that too. It's very, very personal. And the last thing that you want to do is create a situation where you are not any longer trustworthy to your donor. And so when it comes to planned gifts, we have to be very careful about putting their name out there, about listing them in reports, unless they give you that specific okay to do that. Donor stories make, just as we demonstrate today, donor stories make the best messaging, messaging for any kind of gift. And it's no different with planned gifts. I had a donor at Channel 13 who did a $15,000 charitable gift annuity. She called me and said, my friend Iris wants to talk to you. I called Iris. She said, yes, Helen told me she gave you $25,000 for a gift annuity. It was only 15. When I went back to Helen to make sure that she remembered it was only 15, she said to me, Iris can afford more than I can. I upped the ante. That's just what she said. Peer pressure does not stop at the teen years. We want to encourage our donors, whether they're of your annual fund, your special, or planned gifts, to talk to each other, to sit around a table at a Legacy Society event, to talk to each other about the ways, here we go back to that definition, the ways that they found to make a gift to your organization because they believe in your mission. Stacy, you want to wrap up?
Yeah.
I have a question, because I know that we've done mailings that were enveloped and postcard, right? So the postcards don't have a response vehicle, and the enveloped mailings do. Do you see a big difference in response rates? Because it's cheaper to mail a postcard all ways around, but is it money thrown out the window, or are you still getting good responses also from the postcards?
That's an interesting question. We've been dealing with that very issue because we just sent out a postcard for gift annuities and have not had the greatest response. It's hard to segregate whether the economy, what other factors are causing that. So we haven't done a scientific. Anecdotally, it feels like when there's a response card, I advocate a response card, it's so much easier for a donor to just check a box and stick it in the mail. On the other hand, a number of years ago, we sent out first a big list, and then we sent out a postcard for the same thing. And it wasn't until the postcard was sent out that we got responses. And it might have been timing in the year end. These were year-end pushes for gift annuities, which are very often done for tax purposes, or whether it was other factors, or maybe it was the boom boom, the double push. But I actually think that you definitely want to have response cards, at least in some of your mailings, because you're trying to get a response. There's no question. However, in wrapping up, Davida covered a lot of, and there was a little bit, covered a lot, but I want to hit some of the areas that we didn't talk about, and kind of remind that one of the most important things I think in a direct mail that, as I said earlier, one of the best outcomes is that they take the piece and take it to their attorney, or they use it and just fill out the insurance and pension. You can fill out on your own, even without an attorney. Although I always recommend, caveat, go see an attorney or a tax advisor. However, what's really important then is the legal designation, that your name is written in a clear way, so that it says how would you name it in your will, because we get countless wills where they're misnamed, and that eventually the money comes. Sometimes it's ambiguous, though. It could be two charities. For example, the Weizmann Institute. We're in Rehovot, Israel. Some people leave it to the Institute in Jerusalem. It could cause litigation and frustrate the donor's intent, but also it causes a lot of problems that are avoidable. So that, if nothing else, at least when they do put you in their will or their insurance policy, they have the right name and it's clearly marked out. So that to me is a no-brainer. And that gets to the fact that, Andrea's question, as I said earlier, many, many people don't respond. So, if there's a cost benefit, it might be better to include a reply card, but if not, if you can't always afford that, it doesn't mean that it's a loss. You still are reaching those people as long as you have the critical information, which is your mission and your name, and that you can be the recipient of, that you can take money in all different kinds of ways. One of the things that Davida said that I thought was really important is that, yes, every charity, many, many charities are doing planned giving and are sending out information, but your charity, or the one you're working with, is the only one selling what you are selling. We often, gift annuities, for example, if you know the industry, there are rates of return that most charities do, and then some can offer higher rates. And people call us, well, why don't you offer as high a rate as UJA or the JNF? And I say, look, if you want a rate, you can go with them. But if you want to help basic science and research, we're the only one. Or at Weizmann, we're the only one. So your mission is how you differentiate yourself. And plan giving at the exclusion of your mission would obviously not accomplish that. Let's see, a few other things I wanted to say. The part about stories and our messaging is very much storytelling. And maybe you guys want to pass it out. It's really telling donor stories, and it's modeling, and they're real donors, and we do obviously spend a lot of time getting their pictures and their approval, and it really is relevant when they go on the web because that's public. But many of the people, the ones who obviously agree, are very, very proud. And it is the peer pressure, it is the modeling of philanthropy that really often, I think, that sparks that light in the person and gets them to say, hey, I want to leave a legacy. I want to make a difference with my estate. And the other thing I wanted to mention, we talked about some of the traditional plan giving vehicles, bequest being probably the biggest, or estate. Residuary gifts come from insurance, pension, and other assets in your estate. But real estate, art, collections, coins. There's lots of other, plan giving tends to cover these too. And not to say that it's a challenge, I wouldn't necessarily, maybe universities do. I've never necessarily focused only on these, but I certainly include a checkbox on the reply card hinting at it, or I may even refer to it in one of my stories, because donors have these assets, they don't mind giving them away, because what are they doing with them as they age? You know, you have a nice collection, but wouldn't it be nice if you could actually put that to use, you know, feed hungry children or do something else? Wow, what a great thing. So that's just to kind of think about that there are a lot of people holding on to assets as they age that they don't really need, and maybe they could pass it on, but it could be a great way to make a legacy with little pain on their part. Lastly, I just want to refer a little bit to online marketing, because we're doing that a lot more, and we are doing some plan giving email blasts. The age of people that plan giving is principally targeting are on the internet, and I think there's people who have expertise in this way more than I do, but I think those are largely people, we wouldn't want to do just internet for them. We've tried it anecdotally, sending out emails, and it's hard to know how many of them open it. See, we actually have statistics. I don't know if we've done it by age, but it's not the same at all as the number that do mailings. If you're targeting that 80 and up crowd, that 75 and up, although many of them are on the internet now, and I notice I email them a lot, so they are using it. What I do know for sure, so I can't say they're not, but I'm not sure that's the key way I would do it. But what I know is that your website should have prominently, if nothing else, maybe your mission is how to name your charity correctly in your will. Because if the person is very quiet, and many of these people who leave us money don't want a lot of notoriety. They may want to copy somebody, but they don't want everyone knowing that they have all this money. Maybe they don't want their family members knowing that they're giving it all away. But going to your website, either they can go, or their advisor can go to your website. There's some vehicles, real estate I mentioned, lead trusts, where they aren't really for necessarily the 80 and up crowd, but they're for the hedge fund crowd. The people who have all of a sudden a great deal of wealth and want to set up an endowment through all sorts of vehicles. Email is really the way. So it's definitely an emerging field, and I wouldn't do it at the exclusion yet, but I would do it as a complementary vehicle to getting the word out about your different kinds of plan giving techniques, and especially your mission, and most importantly, leaving a legacy to you. And I guess in final, I think that's how I'll end, is that really getting direct. There's no question. And in fact, when I was first asked to speak about this, I'm not really a marketing person. I'm an attorney. And when I was first asked to speak about this with Davida, I thought, plan giving starts with direct response. They told us the title. I thought, is that true? I don't know. And I actually wanted to put the headline with a question mark, because I never thought of it that way. And then as I was developing this with Davida and actually sitting there hearing her talk, I said, oh yeah, you're right. Many of our big gifts came through direct response to online gifts. It's not through their lawyer. It's not through events. It's through these, because again, that population very often wants to be anonymous, quiet, and they are reading your material. And we see that time and time again. The only touch that we can be sure of for all these large residual gifts is that they got direct mail. So I invite questions, and I thank you all.
I just want to add one thing. If you're with an organization, please heed that you are key in your organization to bringing forth the planned gifts for the future. If you are someone here representing a direct mail firm, you can add value to your client relationships by incorporating planned giving materials and discrete mailings, et cetera, and a proposal to your clients for planned giving, and help them raise the funds that way. Thanks so much.
I have a question before we go.
Okay.
3 parts. Why do you call them discrete mailings? When you do them, do you include the house file, the donor file that you're normally mailing through on a monthly basis? And what are your other demographics other than age when you put that file together to do that mailing?
I don't know if we call it discrete in any kind of technical way. We just did for the purpose of this. But it just meant targeted to, maybe there's jargon that we're not familiar with in the field. But we meant mailings that were really looking for planned gifts and not looking for annual gifts.
About an annuity or about a bequest.
Right, exactly. So we start with our regular donor base, but we'll do different things. For example, we did a gift annuity mailing. It was everyone in our donor base 70 and above, I think, 75. Plus, we buy lists, and we get lists we try to always add to that with outside. However, now we're doing a follow-up mailing internally only to previous gift annuitants. So it depends. We base it on, we have a budget, we only have so much, and we do what we can. To bequest mailing, we think we did to 100,000, which is way beyond. We actually, the once a year, we do a bequest mailing, and that is to a very large group, age and sometimes capacity. I mean, I put that in here. If you can get 100,000 people with assets of at least 100,000 or more. If your goal is large residual gifts, that makes sense. I think if you're going to have to narrow it, capacity and age would be my way to do it. And sometimes it's internal because honestly, with gift annuities, for sure, your best customers are your repeat customers. With bequests, you don't want to do new at the exclusion of the ones you're doing, because for sure those are your best prospects. But you don't want to limit it to that group for sure, because those people, a good chunk of our bequests each year are from people we never really talked to. So.
We have other questions before we close out?
Any thoughts about if plan giving buck slips in annual or ongoing appeals, the regular non-plan giving appeal, if they suppress, I mean, I have my own opinion, but I'd be interested in yours, if they repress the appeals response rates in terms of dollars raised?
We hate silos, okay? Because everybody in a development office, membership office, should be working for the bottom line of the organization. And so if a buck slip is going to, for that moment, repress an annual gift, but result in a $100,000 bequest, let me tell you what that does. That person was giving $50 a year, okay, forever. They leave a $100,000 bequest. It's put into endowment. 5% spend down on endowment is what? $100,000. It's $5,000. Right?
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yes.
Okay. $5,000 in perpetuity. That bequest just turned into an annual donor of $5,000 a year, where one didn't exist before. That's the power of the bequest, and I think it's a great idea.
I agree with you, but I want to hear it from the expert.
You know, I'll just add that when I teach plan giving, I always talk about different constituents. You know, you have the donor, you have the advisor, you have the donor's family member, and you have your leadership and your board, because it's managing their expectations, and you have to manage up or out, or whatever you want to call it, because that's all about plan giving. It's making them realize what Davida just said. This is long-term, but this is long-term security for your organization. If it's at the expense of some short-term, at least they should know that before they make a decision one way or the other.